Why orthodontics? Why should you pick orthodontics? How do you prepare for an application to get into residency in orthodontics? What are the schools you should apply to? How do you prepare for your interviews? What are the questions? How do you put your list together for rank lists? All these questions and more will be answered as we talk to student doctor who just matched in ortho. Stay tuned. So, Doc, getting into ortho, just like any residency, is a difficult thing, but especially ortho. It's very popular, very competitive, and there's not a lot of positions. Tell us what was the hardest thing for you about navigating this process and then eventually matching into ortho?
So I would say that the hardest thing is knowing that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. This is not a 1 year, couple month process of just applying. This was the entire 4 years of dental school. I had this goal in mind, and I knew that the planning ahead is what I needed to do to be a good applicant. So it wasn't just the application process itself, it was the planning that it took before.
The black box. The black box, the specialty in dentistry that's known as the black box, which is called ortho. This is Dr. Darwin. Thanks for coming on to another episode of Ask Dr. Darwin. We talk about getting into dental school, getting into residency, and then life as a new dentist. Guys, be sure that you are continuing to share, like, and comment down below on these episodes. This content is being shared to you, with you, and by you so that people like yourself and your colleagues can have some tips and advantages about getting in and navigating the getting into residency process. Also, this episode of Ask Dr. Darwin is being brought to you by Get Into Dental Residency Challenge. Get Into Dental Residency Challenge. This will be a 4-day live event that helps you get some tips and strategies and learn how to navigate the residency application process. For more details, go to the link down below. Check that link out down below, and we want you to join the challenge coming up. So today, we are joined by a very, very happy D4 fourth year dental student who just matched in ortho, student Dr. Mikey Pyevich. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Dr. Darwin. How are you?
Not as good as you. Not as good as you getting into ortho. Your first time, first cycle, which is awesome and just phenomenal. So, guys, as you are listening today, make sure you stay all the way through. We're going to be talking about ortho as it relates to how do you prepare your application, some tips and strategies, and just overall things that are going to be helpful if you're considering applying to orthodontics. So let's jump in. Doc, please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those of us that may not know you and are meeting you for the first time.
For sure. So, hi everybody. My name is Michael Pyevich, but I go by Mikey. I'm a current fourth year at UT Health San Antonio. I'm originally from Bettendorf, Iowa, which is a town in Iowa on the Mississippi River on the Iowa-Illinois border. I was born and raised in Iowa, decided to come down to Texas for dental school, and it's been a great decision. And yeah, as Dr. Darwin just said, I'm starting orthodontic residency next year, so I'm super, super stoked about that.
Yeah, and we will share a little bit later where you're going to be going, the program that you got selected and matched to, and also when we talk about that, we'll share a little bit about the program and things that you're really excited about. But before we can get excited about the match and where you're going, there's a lot of things that go into getting prepared for the application. So let's start off with that. So share with us how and when you started preparing your application for ortho.
So I don't know if my situation is necessarily unique, but I have always known since I was a little kid that I wanted to be a dentist, but like around middle school, specifically an orthodontist. So I kind of came into dental school with the idea that orthodontics is what I wanted to pursue. So with that mindset, I hit the ground running as a first year, made sure I kept my grades up, made sure I tried to get involved with the Orthodontic Association here at UT San Antonio. I got involved with research. So I did all the things I could to make sure I kept my, path in the straight and narrow to become an orthodontist in the future. So I really took like I said earlier, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I really took that to heart and made sure that every day I did a little something to get to my end goal.
Yeah, and your situation is a little bit unique because not everyone listening, watching knows immediately before starting dental school that they want to do ortho or if they even want to specialize. But if you do, uh, one of the first steps is to get involved, right? Like you said, get involved with the local dental society at your dental school, get involved with the people and the faculty. And if you have an ortho program at your school, even better, get involved early. Because like you said, it's a marathon. There are a lot of things that you want to do before, right, Doc? Before you start this application. That is part of the application, but you're going to need a lot more things than just a decision that you want to do ortho to help you complete and fill out your application. So, um, let's talk about after you've pretty much had an idea that you wanted to do ortho. How did you prepare to like investigate and explore different programs and tell us how many programs you ended up applying to and why? Hey everyone, it's Dr. Darwin. Just want to take a quick break from this episode and hope that you are enjoying it. First thing I want to ask is, did you know that a large majority of the individuals like you who watch these episodes are not subscribed to the channel, to the YouTube channel? Nevertheless, we want to say thank you for watching and continuing to share these videos and episodes with others. Next, I want to say is subscribe. Yes, please hit the subscribe button so that you get these notifications each time these episodes are released. Last is I wanted to connect with those of you who are seeking to become an advanced dentist and specialist. And I invite you to our next event called the Get Into Dental Residency Challenge. This is a special 4-day event that will give you direct access to the mistakes that you want to avoid when you're applying to residency programs, and also the 8 steps that you also want to avoid so that you do not have an unsuccessful application submission. The information that we will be covering over those 4 days will be some of the tips and strategies that I teach in my one-on-one and group coaching trainings with clients who are continually and successfully being matched into and selected into high-profile residency programs here in North America. So if you're pursuing or aspiring to get into dental residency this application cycle, this challenge is for you. Check out the link below to receive more details and join the challenge. And also, I would encourage you to enroll in the challenge via the VIP experience. The VIP experience gives you actually access to a 1-hour Q&A session every day of the challenge before we actually get started with the challenge. And it guarantees me to answer your specific questions that you and other VIP experience members have on a daily basis. So I'll see you in the Get Into Dental Residency Challenge, and let's get back to this episode.
So the best source of information, in my opinion, is the class above you. So when I was a third year and was starting to think about applying, I always asked the people in the class above me, the current fourth years at that time, for their advice. There was, I think, 4 or 5 of them that matched into orthodontic residencies. So they were obviously a wealth of information. So having talked to them through Orthodontic Club and getting their phone numbers and stuff, I was kind of told that, the average person applies to 20, 25 programs. Again, I have no idea if that's true or not, but that's what they told me. So I kind of took that to heart. I took it straight from the horse's mouth. So yeah, so I that's how I started preparing. And I ended up applying to around that same, I think it was like the 25-ish mark. I don't remember exactly. And the reason I applied to that many schools was because I really wanted to cast that wide net. I've wanted to be an orthodontist. I've had this goal for so long that I didn't want to wait any longer. Residency for 2 or 3 years is already long enough for me. I didn't want to take another year as a gap year if I didn't have to. So I'd rather cast again a very wide net to make sure I got in the first attempt. Also, I took into account, the different locations in the country. I didn't really see myself going up north unless it was for me to go back home to the Midwest. So I applied to mostly Midwestern schools, Southern schools, and like Southeastern schools. I did apply to a few in the Northeast that I knew people in the past who had gone to my dental school had gotten into. So I did take that into consideration, but location and price as well was something that was important to me.
So those are great points because there are people listening and watching that may want to stay close to home or where they're from. They may have a a low tolerance for cold or extremely hot weather. So location is always key. And I think, well, I definitely know what you said about resources from upper class members that have applied to ortho, got in, and using them as a resource. You all that are listening, watching, you got to use this resource. These are people that have gone through the steps and the process that you want to go through, that you will go through. Reach out to them. So I think that's definitely something that's helpful. And like you said, casting a wide net, um, that's a strategy. For some people, it may not be a strategy. It may be casting a more specific targeted net based on location, preference, uh, how many years the programs is, either whether it's 2 years or 3 years. Some people have a preference for that. And the size of the program. I mean, there's some ortho programs like the Georgia School of Orthodontics that have, what, 20 some positions to other programs that maybe only have three or four. So that's also uh, one of the criteria that you want to look at. So you submit your application, you got your list of programs that you apply to, and keep in mind some of the programs, most of the programs are matched. There are some not non-matched, but most of them are matched. But also most of them have what we call a supplemental application as well, where you have to submit some additional essays. But once all of that is done, you submit that information, then you do this. And those that are listening, you can't see me, but you're twirling your thumbs and you're waiting. What are you waiting for? You're waiting for an interview. So tell us a little bit about the interview day, the number of interviews that you got, and how the interview day was.
So I will, but before that, you just gave me a little bit of PTSD with the twiddling of the thumbs there. So before I talk about the interview day itself, I want to say, you know, the from the time the interviews are or the interviews are, but before that, the time you're waiting after you send in your applications is probably the most miserable month I've ever had in my life. You're sitting there, it's anticipation, you're checking Student Doctor Network 3, 4, 5 times a day. You're seeing Student Doctor Network, people are saying, "Oh, I got an interview here. Oh, I got an interview here," and your inbox on your email is still empty. So even if you apply to a bunch of schools and you get a couple interviews, that's great, but you're still gonna see a lot of disappointment. And that's something that I had to come to terms with because, like Dr. Darwin said earlier, this is a very competitive specialty and a lot of great applicants apply. So it's not an indictment on you. It's just that there are a bunch of people out there that want to get into this specialty and you'll find your place. The interviews will come eventually, but you just can't get discouraged while you're waiting.
So you mentioned casting a wide net and applying to about 25 programs. Of those programs, how many invitations did you get?
Out of the 25, I got 7 invitations. So, and that is a lot of interviews, but it's still, I mean, less than a third, you know. So, like keeping that in perspective, it is, there still is a lot of rejection. Like there were some schools, I would love to get an interview at that I didn't get an interview at. So
Yeah,
just
but
keeping that in mind.
seven interviews, Doc. Let me tell you, I mean, there are people that wish for one third of seven interviews. So even that is, you know, is very great. Is a testimony to your application and things that you have been building over that 4 year period as a D1. So let's not make any mistake. I mean, seven interviews. There are a lot of people that I talk to and that I have coached and mentored that wish they've had, maybe more than one, and especially seven. Seven would be great. So that's an accomplishment. So let's talk a little bit about the interview day. Um, now there are many programs that are going back to in person, which I love, which you as a candidate really want to be able to do because you get a chance to visually smell and experience the location as to where you're going to be training, and also gives you more reality about the space that you're going to be training at and the energy of the people that are in that space because you're going to be there for 2 or 3 years. So tell us a little bit about the interview day. Um, what things were pretty much routine over those seven interviews, and what things were maybe a little bit different, whether it be how the interviews were set up or even the questions that were asked.
So I would say, the main thing that's the same with all of them is there's always going to be a social and there's always going to be a full day of interviews. Some schools had like a half day interview session, but I think it was still 4 or 6 hours. So when they say it's a quote unquote half day, it's still a lot of talking to the residents, to your other applicants, to the faculty. So expect to be there for quite a while. Um, Things that were the same, I would say that everyone wants to get to know the applicant themselves. They've already seen what you look like on paper, but what everyone was reiterating in all these interviews, both the residents and the faculty, they want to get to know the person behind the resume and not, they don't want to hear more about the resume. We know about the resume already. We know your class rank. At this point, some schools don't even give the class rank to the interviewers. They just want to know if this guy or gal can carry on a conversation. If you could see yourself working with this person for 2 or 3 years, that is the biggest thing that these schools are looking for. And, and I think that's great because everyone who gets an interview is definitely qualified to become an orthodontist in the future. But just because you're qualified, you need to be able to show that you can carry a conversation, that you're fun to be around. So I'd say that's the most similar thing between all the schools. Different schools definitely did interviews different ways. I had some schools who had multiple residents, or excuse me, multiple interviewers per interview. I've had one-on-ones, I've had two-on-ones, I had 4 faculty with one resident, I've had 6 faculty with one applicant. So there's definitely a wide variety. It can be pretty scary and nerve-wracking. But again, they're not trying to trick you, they're trying to get to know you.
Getting to know you, very key, right? Getting to know you specifically in person, not on paper, because knowing you on paper is what got you the interview. Now they want to see who you are in person. And yes, it will be a long day. Um, and yes, it will be a focus on you. Who are you, right? Who are you not only on paper, but who are you in person relating to how you're able to hold a conversation. And yes, the different formats. What were some of the most challenging questions for you, if you had any, or maybe difficult questions that they asked?
So I would say questions that are difficult would be some of the more ethical ones, just like how it was getting into dental school. They're going to ask some ethical situations. And sometimes you're not sure the interviewers are very straight faced. They're not sure you're not sure if the answer you're going down is the right path. So just stick to your gut, make the right choice that you think based off your morals and your ethics, what the right decision is. I would say, is orthodontics a right or a privilege is probably the trickiest question I got. Um, and depending on how you answer it, you could definitely answer it both ways. I'm sure you could defend yourself, and I'm sure that whoever asked me that question wasn't necessarily looking for one answer, but they were just looking to see how I was able to go through the thought process or maybe the
Yeah.
stress of getting a question that kind of tripped me up.
Yeah. Yeah. And just your viewpoint, how you view the service that you're going to be doing for, the next 20, 30 years in your professional career,
Mhm.
right? Is it a privilege or is it a right? And depending on who you ask, they may say one or the other, or even both. They may be on both sides of those two things. So good, good, good. Um, so you had your interviews, you had 7 interviews. Are you able to share where you interviewed at?
Yeah, I can. So I interviewed at St. Louis, SLU, Kansas City, UMK, which is UMKC. I went up to New Jersey and Rutgers, which is in Newark. Fort Lauderdale is Nova. Then I was at ASDO in Mesa, Arizona. And then I had LSU and which is in New Orleans and here in San Antonio.
UT San Antonio. Gotcha. So one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Yeah, 7 programs. And a lot of traveling, man, from Midwest to New Jersey to Arizona to Texas, where you're at now, and also to down to LSU, down to Cajun country. And I remember when you were prepping for that interview, some things we were talking about with LSU. So, but again, congratulations on just being able to cast a wide net and get an invitation to get to that most important second step. So once you have all these interviews and you again had 7, now you gotta now the real job, now the real work comes. Now you've gotta list those programs or what we call rank those programs. So tell us a little bit and share with us how you made your decisions on these 7 programs, especially since it was after the interviews, right?
Yeah.
After the interviews, what were some of the things that helped guide your decision on where you ranked programs? And don't tell us where you ranked them because we're going to go to that in a minute. But what were some of the deciding factors for you that were a priority based on how that guided your listing of programs?
Yeah. So the number one guiding factor for me was could I see myself living here, working here, dating here, making friends here, stuff like that for the next 2 or 3 years? Could I see myself living, thriving, and enjoying, this city, this community? And some places I could confidently say yes. Some places I could confidently say absolutely not. So that was great. And that's one of the benefits of having in this post-COVID era, these in-person interviews again, is being able to truly get a feel for the city and the area and your co-residents and the faculty. So that was my number one criteria was, will I be happy here? Because I would pay any amount of money to be happy, and I also pay any amount of money to not be unhappy somewhere for a couple of years too. So to me, that was more important than price. But with that being said, price was number two. Just being realistic, if I can get, the same or equivalent education for a much cheaper rate somewhere, then that was important to me as well to, come out with as little debt as possible.
Yeah.
So those two things, and obviously like geography plays along with, could you see yourself living in that area? But those are the two main criteria.
And those criteria, especially cost, is very important to consider, especially if you're coming from a dental school where, the 4 years of dental school is anywhere from 300 to $500,000. And I don't know what your bill is, but the average is about $300,000 for most dental students across the country. To add on to that, and go to a program, an ortho program, where you've got to spend maybe another $100,000 for 2 more or 3 more years every year can be a big thing. So that's a big factor as well. So you went through your ranks using both where you can see yourself best, the cost and the cost as of the program as some main or your top two determining factors. Then you put your rank list together, right? You put that list together and you have to wait for match day. And match day comes. Match day coming. You don't get a phone call, but you usually get an email, right? And if you have your
Mhm.
notifications on, that means if you got an email or a text, that means it's ringing, right? It's ringing or it's buzzing, and or you check that email and um it's a thumbs up, which you had. You had a thumbs up. So share with us where you're going to be going to become a board certified, or I should say board eligible, leading to a board certified orthodontist.
So I am happy to announce that I'll be staying here in San Antonio for as a part of their 3-year residency program at UT Health San Antonio. So yes,
Woo!
yes, very,
That's
very excited, very blessed, very yeah, very, very happy, relieved. But I also understand, what this comes like the opportunity, the power that this comes with, and how much respect I have for others, and the people that didn't get in, and be able to help others and stuff like that too is something that's really important now. As a person who's on the other side of it, being able to give back and do stuff like this is something that's very important to me and something I hope to continue to be able to do in the
Oh
future.
yeah. Oh yeah, you will. That's going to be your duty, your responsibility, and part of your obligation as an future board certified orthodontist in training. So let's pause there and go back to where you're going to be going, which is well, staying, and you're going to be doing your training. UT San Antonio. Tell us what are some of the things that you like the most, or things that are really excite you the most about starting this program in July?
So when I was applying to schools, I wanted a great mix of clinical experience where the residents are in clinic a lot of the time, the days of the week, and also where you get exposure to research because, continuing education, lifelong learning is important to me. And I learned all these things from the UT residency when I shadowed down there as a first year, second year, third year. I was in these things were instilled in me as the first couple of years of my dental school through their orthodontic residency program. The residents there are in clinic pretty much all day, every day. I think they might have like 1 or 2 half days where they have like a research time or, master's classes, but it is very clinically focused. But again, they still have to do an original research project. So I get the best of both worlds. Secondly, Dr. K, the program director, is the absolute best. Having gotten to know her the last couple of years has been awesome. Seeing how she treats the residents and how she's open to so many ideas with like what the residents bring to her is great. What also is great about this San Antonio program is they have a bunch of adjunct faculty that come in for, one day, one half day a week or every 2 weeks. So you get to really see all the different ways of using different wires, different bracket systems. And that way, when you go into a private practice or another school, after you graduate, you get to really hit the ground running. You're not just used to one wire system or bracket system, where then you go to a new office and they say, we don't have this. So then you're handcuffed. And lastly, the residents, in the feeling of just being in San Antonio with those people that I've gotten to know a little bit has been great. They've all been super nice, super helpful, super open, willing to answer questions. So being a part of that positive culture where it truly feels like a family, I know that's a cliche, but it really does feel like that. And I could see myself being there for a couple of years.
Yeah, and again, for those of you listening and watching, that is so important. It has to be a fit. It has to be a fit, especially for you, but most importantly for you and for them, but more for you because you do not want to be at a program, especially if you're paying money for it. You're paying to be trained like dental school. uh, you don't want to be at a program where you're like, oh God, or you don't want to put down a place on your list, on your rank list, and you're like, oh God, you don't want to, you don't want that because yes, not only do you have to fulfill your commitment to match, but then you also have to pay tuition, and then now you're there, you're like feel like you're stuck like Chuck. No. So very important when you do your investigation and when you're exploring these programs that you look at the culture, you look at the mission, and you look at the people and how the people interact within the processes that they have at the program. So glad to hear that it was a great match, not only for them, but also for you, because that's going to be key. Now, for the program, is there a cost at UT San Antonio, or do you get a stipend?
Yeah, so yeah, we do get a stipend, but it covers, I think, groceries. I think that's about all it covers.
Well, you do
Uh,
have to eat,
yeah,
you
maybe
do
and
have
maybe
to
my
eat.
parking space on top of it. So, it is, I mean, I'm not gonna complain about it, but yeah, we do have a tuition. Yeah, it does not it's
So
not
there's a tuition and there's a stipend. How does that? What do you mean? How does that work?
so yeah, like tuition, I think for first years is like 25 or 30K, and I think our stipend is like $2,000 for the year.
Oh,
So
okay.
they give us a little bit, which is nice, which is good. I'm not going to complain about it, but again,
So overall for this program at UT San Antonio, you will be paying out of pocket more than what you will be receiving in a stipend. Sounds like.
100%. And I think almost every orthodontic residency program, every, yeah,
Yeah, unless it's a hospital-based program. So some in New York where even though there's a fee, the fee is maybe one-fifth, one-sixth of what the stipend is for a PGY 1 or 2 and 3 in New York, which is over 70, close to $80,000. So yeah, it
yeah,
just depends. Just
yeah.
depends.
I think AGDs, some PEDS programs and oral surgery programs will pay you because they have AGDs. I don't know why, but peds and oral surgery because they have hospital privileges, I believe is
Right,
why. I could be
right.
wrong, but because they're in the hospital, they do get a little bit of extra money. But yeah, for orthodontics, yeah, you expect to be paying out of pocket regardless of what program you go to, unless again it was like one of those hospital programs in New York, which I wasn't familiar with because I don't even think I'm able to apply to a school in New York as a fourth year dental student. I think I need to have been working for a year or have done an AEGD.
No, no, no. That's for a license. If you're looking to get a
Okay.
license, you have to do a residency. You would have qualified if you were looking to get a license in New York. If you did an ortho residency, you would have been fine. But no, that's different. That's different.
Okay.
Um, Nonetheless, uh, tuition, very low tuition. I know you mentioned that that was one of the things that you were looking for in a program, one of the factors that helped you rank, because there are some ortho programs. And for you all that are taking notes, there are some programs that where the tuition is like 120, $130,000 per year for 2 or 3 years. Do the math. That may or may not be something that may be of concern for you, but something that you must consider as well. So, one another thing we want to consider is feedback and knowledge. And now, as a D4 who's going through this process and now who has matched into ortho, you're kind of like a residency expert right now. So we want to hear about tips, advice, knowing what you know now and the things that worked for you the best. What were those things and what would you do differently if there's anything, or if there's not something that you would do differently because you got this great result? What were those things that you felt and tips and strategies that were really, really helpful that you want to share with others as far as advice as to what you should do, what you must do, and what you recommend that future or current applicants do to get to match into ortho?
So the first thing you need to do in order to get an interview, you can be the most personable person on the planet. You can be likable, funny, have jokes, um, but you need to make sure you get an interview first. So in order to get your foot in the door, you need to have a strong CV application, and a relatively high class rank if you're coming out of dental school right away, or like a year after. If you're a non-traditional applicant, I don't know how much class rank is important because you've been working for so long, but what I would say is, starting ahead, planning ahead early. Some people don't really want to do orthodontics until later on in dental school, but I would say the moment you are confident that orthodontics is what you want to do, write down a plan. Make sure you have a stepwise process to get to your end goal. Because if you don't, it's easy to get very lost. It's easy to get overwhelmed because there's a lot of things you have to do in order to be eligible to apply to a lot of these programs. There's extra tests you need to take, either the ADEX or the GRE. There's, doing well in your classwork, not only your lab work and your sim lab stuff in dental school, and also finding letters of recommendation. If you don't have great relationships with your teachers, you better start doing that now, because you need 3 to 5 letters of recommendation, and including one from an orthodontist, in order to apply to a lot of these dental schools. And this kind of goes into my second part, which is ask for help. It's impossible to do all of this on your own. I'm very blessed that my family has been a great support system for me, and I have a couple of great friends in San Antonio that I was able to bounce ideas off of. And I even talked about to the people who were in the class above me as well, asking for their input on what they thought of certain schools where they interviewed, what they were looking for in terms of a mix of clinic versus research time. So compiling all that information, as well as planning ahead, was the two most important things for me. And those are the two pieces of information I would share to whoever's applying in the future.
Good pieces of information, good steps, good tips as well. Any other things that you felt were key to your success? Because again, planning ahead, I mean, you have to have a plan so that you can, so you don't plan to fail, but you plan to be successful.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else that was very helpful for you that you felt that maybe um, gave you an advantage in addition to, I know you said you started doing some research early because you knew early that you wanted to do ortho, but anything
Mhm.
else?
Yeah, I mean, starting second year, I made a whole Excel document of every single orthodontic residency, because I knew nothing about it. I didn't know which ones were hospital based. I didn't know which ones were matched, which ones were non-matched, which ones were expensive, which ones weren't. So I started, one Thursday or Friday night, second year, sat down with my buddies, and I weren't doing anything that night. So I just started typing up and went to the I think it was the AAO website, or the AdiaPass website, and I started looking up, every single residency, getting some information on it, at least number of years, if it was match or non-match, or in the price of it. And I was able to guide my focus a little bit. And I was like, do I really want to go to this school where I have to spend this much money and it's in a location I really don't want? Okay, let's cross that off the list. And that was kind of my preliminary, you know, I didn't really realize it at the time, but that was my first time I was really, interviewing the schools on my own. They weren't interviewing me, I was interviewing them as well. So that was really important. And that, again, that's starting early, but it also just, helped me narrow my focus. And then one other thing I'll say is, and this was kind of a coincidence that this happened to me, but I encourage every single applicant to read a nonfiction book. And the reason I say that is because I had a couple interviewers that asked me, what book have I read currently? Or what was the last book you ever read? And I actually had one kind of in the chamber ready to go. But if I hadn't, I think I would have had to make a joke like the pathology textbook or something like that, because I haven't read in years. And now all of a sudden they're asking about a book. I'm like, I don't have time to read a book, but
Right.
so
Ain't nobody got
read a
time
book.
for that, man. Nobody got time for no nonfiction stuff. I'm trying to find the facts that are in this pathology book so I can pass this exam.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
if you
Right.
if you can find some time on a vacation or something, if you're at the beach, or it's raining outside, read a book for a little bit just to say you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congrats again, man. I'm so excited for you. staying home, so to speak, home base. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they have questions or just want to reach out and just connect with you now that you're an expert in this application and getting into ortho and matching into ortho?
Yeah, so my email is my first name and last name, Michael, Michael, and then Pyevich, Pyevich, and then the number 2 at gmail.com.
Got it. Ladies, gents, hope this has been helpful. Reach out to student Dr. Mikey. He's got a couple months before, well, about 5 months before he finishes up. So you better hit him up now, because guaranteed around May and June, when he's finished with school, he'll be starting reading that prophet book, right? The Bible of orthodontics. He will be reading that in preparation for his transition, which means he's going to be busy. He's going to be busy relaxing, but he's going to be more busy preparing for late June and July. So Doc, again, congrats. So very happy for you. Glad we were able to work together and getting your application, more specifically getting ready for the interview, right? Acing the answers to the interview so that you speak the same language as the selection team, so that you definitely gave them every reason why to pick you, because you got picked, you got matched, which is great. So congratulations on your way to becoming a board certified orthodontist. And guess what? You guys too, there's a lot of resources to go check out on your journey. So go to the next video. Go to the next video. Go right now.